thank you so much, everyone who made it here, and thanks for Linda and the organizing team. I'm Jason, Hoelscher Obermaier. I'm going to talk a bit about what we're doing at Apart Research at the moment. The talk is entitled Leveraging Global Talent for Technical AI Safety Research, Apart's Model and Alternatives. And the main purpose of the talk is going to be to give you in the audience a sense of what we're doing and of how I'm thinking about what we're building, and then hear from you your questions and hopefully get a discussion going on what we as an organization and like other talent development and field building organizations might be doing differently in the future. So maybe just to give you a quick sense of who we're talking about. That's me, Jason. Here is the Apart team in the lower left corner. There's Espen Kran, who, like many of you would have met at some point, and some other people from the team. Clement, who is a research assistant with us from Singapore. Finn, who's helping with organizations based in Denmark. And then some research advisors, Christian Schulewit, Fazl Flores, and a research project manager, Natalia, who we just hired, who's going to be with us fairly soon. The organization overall is called Apart Research. We are a nonprofit startup with, as you see, a fairly small team still, but we're currently growing a bit. And we're doing two big things. The first thing is Apart Sprint, aka the hackathons, aka alignment jams. So they appear in different guises, which we run approximately monthly to just offer an opportunity to people all over the place get engaged with AI safety research and try their hands on this type of research. And then the second part is the thing that I'm responsible for within our organization, which is Apart Lab. It's a kind of follow-up program. It can be called a research accelerator for talented people coming out of these hackathons. Or you could call it like a part-time research fellowship, where we try to support the most promising teams that go through our hackathons. And this is roughly what I wanted to cover with you. I'll give you a bit more detail on the things that I've outlined now. So what does the current model look like? What are we actually doing? And how do we think that this actually helps talent development for AI safety on a global scale? What's been working well so far? So give you a sense of like the kind of outputs that we get. And then finally, this is going to be fairly rough, so apologies for that in advance. Some current thoughts on like how this could evolve in the near future. And this is also the part where like I think it might be most helpful for me to get everyone's input. So here's how you can help during this call, during this talk, in the discussion, and also after the talk if you have any ideas. First one would be to point out like hidden strengths and weaknesses that we might be overlooking. So like what could we be doing, or what kind of opportunities do we have that we're not seeing, or what are we doing wrong and like are not seeing and should be fixing. Then I'd also be super curious if there are like people in the audience with experiences either as someone participating in a hackathon or participating in like a research fellowship of one kind or another. And I know that Linda, for example, has plenty of experience running running similar programs, to just share your experiences and see like how it compares. Of course, if just by chance there's someone with like a lot of freely available dollars that can fund more people working on these topics, we're always looking for people to fund us, but also for people to participate in our programs, to collaborate with us on research, and also crucially to advise us on what kind of research we should be doing. Of course, I don't have a lot of context on what you guys currently know about us and what is clear and unclear. So I really encourage you to just interrupt me with questions, raise your hand. If I'm overlooking a comment in the chat or so, then maybe someone can just like speak up in case I'm missing it. All right, so let's dive into this. So what is Apart's model? This is like an admittedly ugly but very simple diagram of our funnel. So we're trying to engage people in across these like two big parts of our program. So at the beginning, we have people that are slightly interested in AI safety research and that might be on our newsletter or might hear about our programs online via some Discord channels, Slack channels, or things like that. So these are the potential hackathon participants that hopefully have like some initial spark of interest in AI safety. And from like the participants that we actually get, I actually don't know a lot about who is in the stage one part. So there's like a big weakness now. I can just infer from like who we get and in the hackathons. But from that part, we know that this is a pretty broad audience, and I think um, it's broader than for a lot of the AI safety field building programs out there. I think AI Safety Camp is also fairly broad, so maybe that's somewhat comparable, but definitely broader than I think many of the more well-known programs, and that has some specific reasons that I'll go into, or I believe that there are specific reasons for that. So yeah, we try to get as many of those interested and get them to sign up for the hackathon. They just need to fill in their email into a little form on our homepage, and then they get a bunch of emails as we approach the hackathon that encourages them to actually take part and to become part of the stage two. Then they'll participate for a weekend, work together with people they might already know or might get to know during the event. They'll get feedback from us on what they're doing, as well as from other experts in the field that we invite to collaborate with us on any specific topic that we're offering. And then finally, if they submit something really interesting and they seem quite committed, then they'll also get an email from me at some point asking them whether they'd be interested to continue to work on that with a bit of a surrounding support structure. So they might become lab fellows in our way of speaking. Here's like a quick impression of what it might feel like. Of course, this is like a biased selection, but I think it's not atypical. So this is like from a hackathon participant who said, actually a female participant in this case, who said, was great meeting such cool people to work with over the weekend. I didn't know any of the other people in my group at first. And now I'm looking forward to working with them again on research projects. Organizers were super helpful and contributed a lot to the success of our project. And then here is a voice from like someone in the lab to get you a sense of what kind of people are there. This is actually an interesting case because this specific lab fellow is quite a bit older than most people we encounter in the AI safety sphere. So he's like already in his 50s and has like a pretty long career in tech already as a like project manager in different startups. And he's saying, yeah, I'm like a lot of people here, I'm trying to transition into AI safety. And yeah, says that if when he lands a job in AI safety, it'll actually be because of Hard Lab's help. So it feels like he's well supported there. And actually, this specific fellow is kind of an interesting success story because he was just now actually hired by Far AI to help them with research project management. So he like made a pretty big leap. And yeah, we like to think that the kind of thing that we've been doing here has really helped him get into the position where he felt confident applying. Okay, now a bit more detail on these hackathons. As I mentioned, these are like weekend-long events, so they start on Friday. Actually, tomorrow evening, yeah, on the 24th, a new one kicks off, which you see in the lower right. And this one's dedicated to security evaluations. And then they go on for the whole weekend. We have keynote speakers who give some input on the topics that we're dedicating the hackathon to. And we offer some kind of support structure in the by way of office hours where people can check in and get feedback on what they're doing, or like help them debug their project in whatever way is most reasonable. It's mostly not the technical parts; it's more typically things around methodology or what would be reasonable to pursue. that's what most people are looking for. But we do also offer them like technical support, so we can give out API keys if people need to use models that they don't have access to and things like that. Then, as you also see in this like little announcement, we also give out prizes to actually incentivize people to submit something. It's not a huge amount that we need here, but I think it does help get this kind of sense of, yeah, let's hand something in. So that does help quite a bit, even if it's not like a lot of money. But the whole community is pretty global. On the top right, you see like I think by now slightly outdated map of where participants have come from. Or actually, I think this is not even participants. I think this is actually local hackathon sites that have been happening in the past 2 years. So to understand that, I need to say that like the event is remote first, so it like happens primarily on Discord, and all the events and like office hours and the support structure is all available online. So there's like really not a barrier to people participating from anywhere, as long as they have like a stable internet connection. But we do encourage people to set up local sites and like get together in small groups to collaborate on this, so that it's like a more fun experience. And so this map here shows a couple of places where people have set up this. It gives you a sense of this being a fairly global thing. So we do get regularly people from all hemispheres and from the north and the south and all places. And I saw a little question, just trying to find the chat. Yeah, so the question here was, are hackathons good for college students who are at the beginning of their AI journey? Yeah, I think the answer here is a clear yes. There isn't really like I think a hard requirement in terms of what kind of technical skills you need. And the types of projects that people tackle are fairly broad. So it can be from like analyzing existing data sets to find some weaknesses, which might only need like, I think in the extreme case can just mean downloading some data and like looking through it and taking notes on what you observe. And then can go to like arbitrarily sophisticated projects that like require some technical skills. But we don't like prescribe the exact topics that people are working on, and we encourage people to come up with like ideas that fit their interests and their skills. So in short, yes, anyone who like understands what AI roughly means and like what current models are, what a data set is, and what the rough question of the hackathon is totally fine to participate here. Okay, yeah, I mentioned that this community is fairly global. I think our Discord for the Alignment Jam has 1,500 members now. In terms of like signed up participants for past hackathons, I think we had over 1,200 by now. We had over 50 local site organizers, and by now I think it have accumulated a total of more than 200 research projects that have been submitted. So it's a like pretty well established program by now. Yeah, I think that would be all I say for now about the hackathons, and I'll move on to tell you a bit about the part lab, and then we can go back and go slightly deeper into what comes out of these specific parts of our funnel, so that you get a better sense even. So what happens after the hackathon? If there's like a really cool project and there's a team that seems very committed and very excited about the work, then they'll get an email from us and we'll ask them whether they want to join our research fellowship, which runs for 4 to 6 months. It's part-time, though it typically requires at least 10 hours per week, and then depends a bit on like, as you approach, I think, a submission deadline or so, then of course it might be quite a bit more intense. It's hard to like make it 10 hours a week the whole time. It's like remote first and actually remote only for now. Sometimes we bump into our lab fellows at conferences or so, and then of course we try to meet them, but we currently don't have like a fixed structure for meeting them in person. It runs on a cohort structure, so we start a new cohort every quarter. So the way this works is when we approach like the kickoff date, I and Espen will just review all the projects that have been submitted to the hackathons in the past quarter, basically, and like basically do come up with a short list of let's say 10 to 15 projects that we'll reach out to and ask people if they're interested. And then because not everyone has time and not everyone is like has this as their first priority, we probably end up with like 5 to 6 projects per quarter at the moment, and around 15 fellows that start at the same time and go through the process outlined on the side. So after the selection stage, we onboard them, and then we have like a somewhat yes, you will have time to give feedback. I'll make sure that there is plenty of time at the end. I think I'll end probably in like 15 minutes or so. So we will have almost half an hour for discussion. So the structure of this fellowship is outlined on the right-hand side, and the idea behind this whole process is basically to give people a couple of intermediate deadlines, because if we want to, like, I have to say what the overall goal is. The overall goal is like to actually help people to get their initial research idea from the hackathon into a shape that is actually kind of publication grade. So like really like bridge the gap from something that is like a kind of pilot project that you can hack together in a weekend to something that is really like tested and would basically withstand peer review. That takes time if you just have 10 hours per week. So there's like a drawn out timeline. And if we just ask people to work on this for 6 months without any kind of intermediate checkpoints, it's going to be super frustrating and it's not going to be successful. So what we do is we kind of introduce these intermediate deadlines. So we divide the whole thing in 4 so-called legs. And every leg has like a deliverable associated with it that helps people somewhat stay in sync across the cohort and also like see some visible progress along the progression of the fellowship. So each of these legs will take around 4 to 5 weeks. We're somewhat flexible there depending on how we see people progress. And towards the end, as you actually approach something that you would write up and send to a journal or to a conference or like disseminate in some other way, it might actually diverge a bit more, because then it depends a lot on what you're actually targeting and how ambitious the team members feel about what they want to do there. But it starts with like a kind of pilot phase where people just look over what they've done during the hackathon, kind of try to review it themselves critically. Oh yeah, I'll get back to this question about the feedback and how the processes have evolved. And the end of this process is like a concrete research proposal that the research team feels confident about. And I again want to emphasize that in contrast to some other programs, we really leave like the ownership of the project in the hands of the teams. So we do give them feedback, but we don't come in with like an agenda or so and tell them, okay, this is like a project that would be great to work on. Now execute. Instead, like people come, develop their ideas further, get some feedback from us and from some other people. Hey, maybe this is like not the ideal direction. You could like think about this direction instead. But they define like the project quite a lot themselves. So at the end of the Slack one, they present their ideas to the rest of the cohort, get feedback, and understand what the rest of the cohort is working on. And I'm gonna skip a bit now because it's probably not too important to go into every detail here. But the remaining legs are kind of refining the research step by step. So the second one would be to write a kind of a bullet point paper draft where you just lay out the research methodology that you intend to follow, and maybe write down already kind of what you're expecting in terms of results, what would you think you would actually measure, what kind of statistical tests you would actually implement to see if something's significant, things like that. And then we like swap these kind of drafts between the teams and like have every team like review another draft of another team. That helps people to like understand what other people are working on and actually gets them some kind of accountability. The next step is to kind of fill in the gaps in this draft, do some experiments to get some first numbers, and like fill in the kind of the missing diagrams and graphs and numbers, and then hand this over to like a more experienced person, a senior advisor from outside, get some like feedback from that, go back to the draft and improve it until you can submit it. That's basically the overall process. And what we provide along this path is on the lower left, it's like research project management. So we make sure to organize weekly check-ins with the teams, that they have like a kind of a accountability structure for them, connecting them with senior advisors. So like making intros for them with researchers that have like matching interests. We support them with funding applications. We don't give out stipends at the moment. We don't have the funding for that, but we do think that it's actually maybe even more valuable for them to get into the mode of actually applying for research funding themselves, and we can help them a lot with that. And then finally, of course, with publication dissemination and helping them get access to compute as needed. Okay, what are, I think, my view of like what distinguishes this from some other field building or talent development initiatives out there. So the first is, yeah, it's remote first and it's globally accessible. There are some other programs that share this. AI Safety Camp is a great example of that. But there are like quite a few programs that don't have this, that would actually require people to, I don't know, move to Berkeley, London, or some other place for a couple of months, which makes it hard for people who have like ongoing commitments with, I don't know, maybe a family or a job that they don't want to drop immediately. The next one is like part-time compatible and highly variable commitments. So along this whole pipeline, people can just try something during the hackathon for a weekend, and even within this frame, it's like totally variable from like people who just like work on something for 3 hours and write up their like first idea. Probably it's not enough to get something really interesting, but it's open to any kind of commitment, and people can gradually hone in on the ideas that they find most interesting and follow up on those. Then it, I think, has a very high level of like autonomy and productivity on the participants. So as mentioned, while we do like give suggestions for what people could be working on, we do follow up on like everything that people come up with. Like sometimes the feedback might be, yeah, this doesn't seem so promising, but we do encourage people to really come with their own ideas, and I think there's some value in that. And then finally, it's in principle highly scalable. So our costs per participant are actually fairly limited. There is some parts that scale linearly with the participants. Of course, we need the kind of team capacity to organize these weekly check-ins. So on the lab side, there is a bit of a limitation there, but that's fairly low effort, like maybe an hour or two per week per team. On the hackathon side, I think we haven't really hit the limit yet. So if we get 150 or 200 participants per hackathon, we can still run it with like a small team of 2 or 3 people who are really monitoring the Discord server and just like replying to some messages. And a lot of people just don't really need that much input on top of the materials that we're providing and the kind of input from the speakers. Okay, and what this gets us, in my opinion, is yeah, we can get access to AI safety talent that can't move to Berkeley for maths. Just like say it in a kind of I don't know how you say this. Say it in a somewhat abbreviated way. So that means, for example, more senior folk who might already have a job in an organization that they can't immediately quit, maybe because they also have a family and they want to like try their fit first before making a jump. This model is also, I think, fairly good at enabling collaborations with a very wide variety of AI safety organizations. So through the hackathons, we basically every month have a new partner, and we do follow up on a lot of these collaboration opportunities by trying to get people then also to engage with the lab fellows when they continue their work. And also through this like highly iterative process where we basically repeat the same thing every month, and then on the lab side every quarter, we have like lots of room for experimentation. So I think we can adapt fairly quickly to feedback, and if we get good feedback, like I might get from you guys, then we can use this on the next iteration and can learn quite rapidly. All right. I'm gonna skip a lot of slides now because I think it's a bit boring, but I just want to give you like some ideas on what this looks like on a more specific level. So here's just like a small selection of hackathons that we ran in the past couple of months, to give you an idea of what kind of topics are in scope for us. So it's fairly broad. Like the last one that we ran on the beginning of May was on risks from AI to democratic institutions. So it was more on the governance side, but also regarding technical initiatives that might protect democratic structures in an AI-dominated world. Then we had a hackathon, I think in March with Meter, where we basically just had people work on the like tasks that Meter is using for testing the language models in their task suite. We had a hackathon that was probably last October or so with the Cooperative AI Foundation, where we had people working on failure cases in multi-agent AI systems. And in February, I think on the right lower part, we had an hackathon that was dedicated to multi-agent systems and the security of them, in collaboration with Flashbots, who are like typically working on some kind of crypto stuff. So like we're also experimenting with like reaching out to organizations that might not be the most typical collaboration partners for AI safety projects. Yeah, here's some of the future ones. The one this weekend on security evaluations. So specifically also trying to get some ideas that could be implemented for the Safe Bench competition. The next big one is going to be at the end of June, around detecting deception in AI systems. So that gives you some idea. Maybe I'm gonna just show like 2 or 3 cases of what's been handed in the past. So this one I think was from the multi-agent hackathon that we ran with the Cooperative AI Foundation, the project that actually is interesting because it was then further developed on their own. So this was a case where people just like decided to run with the hackathon idea themselves. They didn't like need any kind of input from us to develop this idea further, so they didn't actually become part of a part lab. But they had like this idea to kind of study what would happen if LLMs were to be used in geopolitical negotiations and what kind of escalation risks you see there. They had a pretty good submission. That was the thing that you see on the lower right. So it's like a short PDF write-up of their hackathon project that they did during the weekend. And then they took this and within a few days actually developed this into something that was submitted then to NeurIPS and became a poster there. And I think was even reported on. So like people can actually be quite successful, like just developing these ideas on their own if they have the research experience, of course. Yeah, maybe I skipped this one. This is pretty similar. Here's like a different one from this democracy hackathon, where people just studied what would happen with like the feedback systems that are currently in place in democratic countries for getting feedback from citizens and how that could be spoofed or overloaded with AI bots. Was a quite interesting project, I think. What else? This was a project from this multi-agent security hackathon that I think was also quite interesting, where the team looked basically at what's called dark patterns, which is a thing that came up in the controversy around social media companies. It's basically studying the ways in which companies kind of bind users against their will, and seeing whether this actually also applies to AI chatbot interactions, and whether current companies, AI developing companies, might actually use these patterns to bind users against their will. Yeah, maybe this is the last one that I'm going to show. This was also from the Democracy Hackathon project by two current lab fellows, actually, who were just training sleeper agents and demonstrating that you could actually have sleeper agents kind of activate on specific election contexts, so that they might be kind of impartial chatbots before the election, and then start giving this information specifically in the election context. It's gonna skip the rest. There's much more. Or maybe I'll say one more thing about this one here, because this is another way in which we can develop projects further. So this one was actually handed in by two Google software engineers, Andre and Siyue, and they just like took language models and built some scaffolding, and then measured how good they were at solving capture the flag challenges, which are these kind of tests from cybersecurity to test like hackers' capabilities. And we found that project super interesting and quite promising. So when that project was over, we actually ended up just writing a grant application for developing this project further. And when we had the money, we just like got back to the people and asked them whether they would, given the funding that's available now, whether they would want to continue to work on this. And they're actually now working on this. So this was like a case where we found it kind of so promising that we decided to just put in the effort to secure the funding preemptively, and then just try to convince people afterwards to work with us on this. So what we're doing now with this project is we're kind of developing a more extensive and more high quality cyber capabilities benchmark that is still like inspired by capture the flag challenges, but has like a lot of human data curation, and will hopefully be better than the existing benchmarks, which rely a lot on like automated scraping and have like a lot of quality challenges. Yeah, maybe I'll spend like 2 more minutes on saying something about a part lab. So this is a kind of an inside view what this looks like if you join a part lab. We best provide like this kind of support structure, and we will get people into a shared Notion workspace with all of with the whole lab. They have their like project page here, and they get kind of access to a lot of supporting material on how they can like review the current ideas, how they can develop them further. And yeah, you see like there's a calendar with check-ins where they see when they'll meet with the advisors and things like that. Yeah, and here's like some stuff that has come out of the lab in the past. This was a paper by Michel Lowe, who presented this actually at the Transformative AI Safety Conference in Tokyo, and it won a like best paper award there. This was a lab project that is probably, I think this was from the third cohort, so like end of 2023. This was like my lab project, so I also got in touch with our part by just participating in a hackathon and then developing the project further. So that became an ACL paper where we worked on improving a benchmark for detecting edit failures, so kind of evaluating the capabilities of model editing techniques. Yeah, and here's like another one that's also more interpretability style that was presented at the ICLR conference recently. And I'm gonna skip to some other stuff and going to wrap up my part of this before we jump into the discussion with my thoughts on the next steps here. So just as a reminder, what are we actually aiming for? We want to have a global community, which is somewhat representative and not as heavily biased towards, like, as the global north and like the US in particular, of people able to do AI safety research. We want to make sure that that kind of research is high quality and is wherever possible and wherever reasonable, also subject to the kind of same epistemic standards as normal academic research. So we want to take these research projects that we get in and actually develop them into peer-reviewed publications. We want to enable AI safety talent to do research themselves, and the way we do it currently is we try to place as much responsibility into their hands, provide surrounding support structure, but make sure that they like do all the crucial steps for actually successfully doing research, which means developing their ideas, debugging it, asking for feedback, responding to feedback, applying for funding, making sure that they disseminate their ideas, things like that. And we want, I think, this is somewhat speculative, but I think we want our model, because I think it's fairly flexible, to really remain flexible in responding to emerging risks. So we want to be a place where we can work on topics as they come up and maybe be more, somewhat more agile than other places. Yeah, if you want to contribute, there's a couple of ways you can do so. Besides, of course, just regular participation in our events, you could also help us by becoming a co-organizer of some of our events, become a speaker if you have a topic that is like close to your heart and is a good fit for our hackathons. Sponsor, of course, if you have some funding to give away, or help us judge projects. So we always need also good people to review the submissions. You can also become an advisor to our team if you have like specific insights into the AI safety landscape that would help us become a better organization, or become an advisor to our research teams if you're like a researcher and have overlapping interests with what we are working on. Then that's also a good option. If you by chance run an organization that wants to hire people, then you can also help us by connecting with us and kind of taking the best people coming out of our process and giving them a chance to work on this full time. Or you can support us by funding us, of course. We also have like a couple of jobs open currently, so if you're interested, you can look there. And now to the speculative part. So some things, this can be extended. As a reminder, this is the funnel as it currently looks like. Some directions for growth that I think are plausible and that we need to prioritize among. First one is like the most obvious one, I guess, is just scale, just support more people, grow the team on our side so that we can run these events more reliably, and that we can support more teams working on their research projects. The second one I would call specify, which would be to target more intentionally, be more intentional about what kind of people we want to get in. Currently, we don't have like a lot of resources devoted to that. We just we accept everyone, and I think we want to continue to do that. But we could, of course, be more intentional in our outreach and try to like reach specific communities that we might want to engage more. Then, of course, raise the quality bar for the outputs of the hackathons and also for the lab process. And the kind of less obvious ones, I guess I would frame as extend longitudinally and extend transversely. What I mean by that is longitudinally would be what actually happens after the fellowship is over. Should we be adding some support structure there? Would that be useful? And extend transversely, by that I mean, who else could be involved along this process? What other kind of entities or organizations could be involved and could profit from being integrated into a process? And this is like another somewhat ugly figure, but I think it gets the idea across. So what could it mean to extend longitudinally? some things that we've been toying around with, or ideas like, could we, if we find people across this lab process that are like have ideas that are somewhat close to productization or could actually be turned on a project into a product, could we offer some kind of entrepreneur in residence program where we support people to develop their ideas into something that they could actually spin off? Or if we have people that like really stumble upon their own agenda, should we actually attempt to become kind of a more traditional lab for those people and like offer them full-time positions to continue work on that, which could be called like a researcher in residence program? So none of this is like is something that we would immediately jump to, but this is something that is like in the back of our minds. And the other thing, this is the last slide that I'm going to show before opening the discussion, is this kind of idea of extending transversely. So the vision that I've presented of our funnel was like fairly focused on the fellows or on like the people going through this. So like really was presented as a talent development pipeline. You have some people signing up for a hackathon, and then you have some people who are particularly committed and talented becoming these kind of research fellows and continuing their research. But there's other funnels that happen at the same time and that we could put more effort into and could focus more on. One is this kind of, I think the more obvious one is like the idea funnel. So before a hackathon, we'll run a short event where we ideate with people and like collect ideas that people could work on. And the more interesting ones, I guess, I hope, are then picked up by people during a hackathon, and they say, oh, this sounds really cool. I would like to do something about this. And then again, after the submission, there's a review process, and the more promising of the submitted reports have a higher chance of like getting into the lab. So it's also a funnel for project ideas. And then the final funnel that I think I wanted to touch on is the advisor funnel. So we have a couple of touch points with potential research advisors that starts also in the planning of the hackathon. When we collaborate with an organization, we are in touch with their researchers and ask them what the most interesting questions currently are for them. So they can like dump a couple of ideas in there, and then they get in touch maybe during the hackathon or the sprint with some of the participants and like can give feedback and interact there. And then if they're particularly engaged and like really seem super interested, then I would probably try to like convince them to actually stay on and help some of our research teams on an ongoing basis by continuing to give feedback. And that's, I think, an interesting opportunity that we have there. If you compare it with some other programs like, I guess, MATS or so, where like the advisors do have a lot of like pre-committed work. So they need to like do a lot of work to actually propose their work stream, to do the candidate selection, and they need to be committed from the start. Whereas here we have a model where potential advisors can basically kind of self-select into this process and kind of continue along the funnel as long as they want. And if they're happy to just like dump some ideas or give a talk, then that's fine. But if they're like excited by this and want to continue, then they can give some feedback to a research project. And if they really like the project, they can just like stay on and like become a co-author on this. So that's another way that we could like emphasize in the future, I think. Yeah, and sorry for taking more time than I expected. I do hope that we still have a lot of time for discussion left. So please give me your questions or feedback.